We have Adam Vicarel here to talk with us today, and I'm really excited to chat with you because it's going to be on a topic that's a little bit controversial, but really important. We are talking about working for free as an artist and if it's ever okay, when it's okay. Really good topic. Adam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be chatting with you. My name is Adam Vicarel. I run a small design studio here in Denver, Colorado, and we specialize in branding, lettering, and mural painting. And the way in which this conversation kind of came up is I'm giving this keynote talk, a webinar in a couple of weeks here, November 21st from 3 to 4:30 p.m. And one of the points that I make in this keynote talk is about the value of doing free work. And that's why we're talking. It's a very controversial subject. And so kind of wanted to dive into this a little bit and give a little taste of what this keynote talk is, this webinar. And generally speaking, what it is for me, it's looking back at what I feel the six most important things that you can do as a creative entrepreneur to turn a passion or a practice into a profession or your full-time creative gig. So these are kind of the business mindsets that I think are really important to adopt. They're oftentimes things that we don't talk about a lot, like doing free work. So yeah, here to just dive in a little further on it.
Amazing. So yeah, if you're watching this before November 21st, 2021, then you are in luck. We're going to link everything down below, including a little 10% off code. That code is Lumiere10, and we're just going to put all the information below.
If you are watching this after November 21st, yes. You won't be able to see it live, obviously, but you can still download. So it's still available.
Perfect.
So bam.
Okay, bam. That's awesome.
Bam.
Okay, let's talk about working for free or for a low pay. So let's start off with, when is it absolutely not a good idea to work for free?
Yes. And this is something that I think, we've kind of talked about before. This is a very nuanced subject matter. I think a lot of people want it to be black or white. Either you do free work or you don't do free work. And as my very wise father has said to me, there are not simple solutions to complex problems or complex questions.
Yeah.
And this is just that. There's a lot to consider. There's tons of factors to kind of weigh. But overall, I think one of the main red flags when considering doing free work is when your client or your prospective client is suggesting the free work. So you're not saying, hey, this is something I might maybe do for free because of X, Y, Z. They're saying, hey, what's up, designer? This is a great opportunity, amazing exposure. It's going to look great in your portfolio, or we guarantee if you do this free one, it's going to lead to a ton of work down the line. So those instances, and so many of us have experienced that. That is somebody who is, whether directly or indirectly, trying to take advantage of the skill set that we as creative individuals provide. And that's what I think we should avoid, because there's no value exchange. There's the promise of value that they're saying, like, yeah, in the future, this will be something. But with that said, I kind of want to set it straight that you can do work in exchange for exposure. If you, the artist, decide, hey, this would be great exposure for me, I'm making that choice for myself, that's a good time to maybe consider it. So I think it really simply just comes down to whether it's your inclination that it's a good idea or their suggestion. And that's where it starts to get a little weird.
Mm-hmm. So how do you decide when it might be advantageous for you for exposure or for marketing purposes, or whether it's just like something that you want to kind of volunteer and do because you think it's a good cause? Like, talk through some of the circumstances where you might take on free work.
Yeah. And I think that's, it's a good question. I'm happy you said when it might be good marketing, because in many ways, the word exposure has such a negative connotation because it's always used in this sense.
Yeah. And like the used car salesman of art way.
Yes, exactly. Which I think this mustache nicely positions me in that category.
There you go.
Now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Used car salesman. It's me. So I think the looking at project opportunities that might not be able to pay you your normal rates, when we look at a project like this, I think it's worth looking at as a potential opportunity to build a relationship as opposed to just directly fulfilling a single transaction. And it's kind of the idea of playing the long game versus the short game. If you have a long-term, long-standing relationship with the client, you will have work for a long period of time, as opposed to the short term, you do one project, you get paid, you're in, you're out. So that said, I think shifting our focus from that direct transaction to a relationship potential is a big deal. And other times that you might consider doing free work, as to maybe be advantageous, is considering, maybe it's a really good portfolio piece or case study for your website. Maybe it gets your foot in the door with a new industry. For instance, my first beer can design, it was less than I ideally wanted to get paid, but I've always wanted to design a beer can, and the opportunity arose and I was more than happy to do it. So I then had that as a case study, and I'm able to now way more easily land that type of project moving forward. I think it's also worth considering, is it work that you're really passionate about? I think if a project comes up to you and, for me, I'm, at least in this moment in time, I'm really involved in the fitness community in Denver. And I'm very interested in investing time and resources, energy into work that is in that industry so that there's more visibility and people see me as somebody who's involved in that industry, but that can execute, design, murals, something else that other people can't. So I think that's really important. And lastly, I think the idea of generally just being a good human being, and is the project something that's helping others, maybe helping a nonprofit, helping a business who maybe can't afford quality design. Maybe this is an opportunity to do that. So tons of different, considerations to look at when doing free work. So as I said earlier, it's not really this one size fits all, black and white, yes or no. There's really a lot to think through.
Mm-hmm. And I think something that is interesting to think about too, is that a lot of us, when we're just starting out, make up imaginary projects and do them for free anyway. And building your portfolio is something that a lot of us have to invest a lot of time in that we don't get directly paid for. So there is just part of being a designer that requires an investment of time and energy, a lot of it up front. You have to prove your skill set and show the value that you can bring. So this is just another kind of way to go about that, I think.
Yes, and I think that's a great point about doing the personal projects that we as designers kind of put upon ourselves, where we don't have a lot of client work maybe. So okay, I'm going to do a coffee shop branding project for my portfolio. It's totally self-initiated. But there's also the opportunity where maybe there's a coffee shop that you could rebrand. And let's say they didn't want it, but you propose it. They're like, we don't have money for that. You're like, well, I'll do it for free if you implement it, kind of thing. That's a little tricky. It's who knows if they actually will. But you have the opportunity to actually create a project that will be real and in the actual world. And then you build this business relationship. And when anybody goes to that coffee shop now, they see oh, wow, beautiful branding. Who did it? This guy. Mustache.
So I want to talk about too, one of the biggest reasons that people say don't do free work, and kind of hear what you have to say about the situation. So if one designer, it's their dream job, they're really excited and they say, hey, I'll do this for a really low pay, or I'll do this for free. Is that kind of taking away from the industry standard? Is that kind of hurting the next artist, or kind of how do you view that? And I know it's really nuanced. So yeah, what do you say to that?
Yeah. And so that's definitely where it starts to get tricky. And I think that's where people get really heated and passionate about this topic.
Right.
Because if let's say there's a project that we both would normally charge 10 grand for, and they approach you, you're like 10 grand. They approach me and I'm like, I'll do it for 3. Then it's all of a sudden we're both out 7 grand. And this client now has this perception that the work that's being created that is valued at 5 figures is now only worth 3. And then they have that expectation moving forward. And it's actually likely that moving forward, they'll try to get it for even less. Everybody's out for a deal. So I think in those situations, what I really try to do is ensure that the client always understands, or the customer, whoever, understands the like innate value of whatever it is that's being done. So if I'm literally about to paint a mural for this gym I've been going to, and we're doing it for trade, for membership. But I will invoice, it'll be zeroed out because it's for a trade, but it will say, I don't know what it actually is going to cost yet. I haven't figured it out, but $7,500, let's say. They will get an invoice for $7,500, but it'll be nixed out and say for trade. So that way, moving forward, they actually know what that project is worth. So I don't think that necessarily like perfectly solves the problem that you proposed, but I think what it does is it ensures that nobody's walking away thinking like, if I just manipulate these designers, I can get stuff for cheap, and that's just okay to do. So I don't know if that really solves the problem, but that's how I personally approach it.
Well, I think you have to approach each situation differently, and there again, not one size fits all answer to things, and it'd be nice if there was, but there just isn't. And people are in different situations in their careers, and some can afford to take on free work and some people can't. So that kind of comes into the mix too. But like you said, you're getting trade of a membership to this gym, that can be really expensive as well. So you're not technically doing it for nothing. I mean, it's probably quite a discounted trade, but I mean, maybe even not. I don't know how much this gym is, but
yeah, it's exactly that. I think generally speaking, as long as there's some sort of value exchange and that's known by both parties, I think that starts to even the playing field. And that way one side isn't feeling taken advantage of or doing the advantage taking.
Yeah. And I love the idea of sending an invoice and making it very clear how much this would actually charge, because then it starts to open their eyes to what these things cost. Even if they've never worked with a designer before, now they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, there is a perception that the creative industry is the only industry that does free work. Do you think that is accurate?
I do not. Yeah, I think honestly, this is one of the things that initially got me early on when I personally was doing a couple free projects or underpaid projects, 5 years ago. And people were like, creative, like, why are you doing that? This is the only industry that has that expectation. What are you doing? And I got really down on myself. I'm like, oh God, I am feeding this fire. And as I kind of moved past it, and as I look back, I'm like, wait a minute. So many industries do this, doctors, salespeople. I mean, it is not unique to the creative industry. And I don't know who started this fable that we tell ourselves, but if you consider a doctor, they go through, not only do they go through undergrad and then med school and a residency and a fellowship, so they go to school for basically ever, but that residency and fellowship, they're normally getting paid like 10 to 20% of what their normal salary would be if they get the job. And the residency and fellowship is when you prove your value to actually potentially get that job. You prove that you're capable. Kind of like a cheesy thing that I say, but it's so true, is I believe that sometimes in instances like this, you have to prove your worth, or you have to prove your value as to receive the work or to land the job. So in the instance of the residency and fellowship, doctors are doing it for literally years. In the example of somebody who works in sales, they spend a majority of their time on calls, going to meetings, going out to dinners, taking their clients out to events, like literally just schmoozing. Schmoozing is maybe not the right word because it sounds sleazy, but it's like more of they are spending all this time and resources conveying their value, proving their worth, with the hopes, and it's literally just hopes, to actually land the deal or land the project. So sales industry is like running the world, doctors are saving it. So those two huge industries are both doing free or underpaid work in order to ultimately get the work, just as the creative industry does.
Mm-hmm. And there are so many examples of artists in our industry who have done this in such a great way to launch their careers, like Lauren Hom, for example.
Totally. Perfect.
She, with her passion project of like the signage for restaurants, and she was going around doing that. And like, also she was doing she did her like affirmations. I forget what they were called, or like not affirmations, but like little lies she tells
The
herself.
lies to herself. Yeah.
There we go. And then
Drinking her
that
boyfriend's
turned
tears.
right. So passion projects are huge for investing your time up front for no guaranteed money, but they can lead to amazing things. Like Lauren got a book deal from that when she was doing her restaurant signage and murals and whatever it was in the restaurants. She was getting paid in food and trades, but then, you know, they turn into bigger relationships. And now she's, you know, Lauren Hom off doing her own thing. And then like Becca Clayson is another great example of, she did like for one of her clients, just a passion project tactile lettering piece. And she just put it up, just a brands that she really liked. And then they ended up seeing that and hiring her. So these are strategic marketing tactics that you can do, and nobody's going to pay you to just come up with the idea. You have to prove that you have this idea, and then other people can take it from there, you know?
Totally. Yes. And it is sometimes a matter of, showing like you have an idea, you got to show it sometimes. And I think just to make it maybe a little bit more approachable, because I know that like the Becca Claysons and Lauren Homs are, you know, kind of top tier in many of our eyes.
Well, they didn't used to be. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. But I think on a substantially smaller scale, I never got paid once to do hand lettering for like 2 years. And I just did it for fun on the side, for fun, and was just like posting on Instagram. And it is only through doing that, through doing it for free, through like proving the value of what I could bring to the table, that I then got hired to do it. So a much smaller scale, and it was the first project. It was literally like a $200 t-shirt design, but it's, I mean, everybody is doing it. I think, I think if people say they've never done it, it's likely a fallacy.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe when people think free work, they don't really consider all that stuff that really does fall under free work. They think about like Nike coming to you and being like, can you do this for free? Which is obviously not okay. That's pretty clearly like, no, we're not gonna go with that. But yeah, there's so much other stuff that does technically fall into free work. Anything where you're investing your time with no real promise of clear payment, but you are being strategic about how you're investing that time to hopefully get something down the road or meet a goal. So let's talk about something that's really important, which is when you are doing free work, we need to like create some boundaries, because it's your precious time, and they shouldn't have the same kind of reign, I don't think, that clients who are paying you have. So talk a little bit about that and how you set those boundaries.
Yeah, I think this doing free work is just as important to have a like succinct and controlled design process as paid client work. Honestly, to your point, maybe even more important, because if they start to get unruly, or, you know, let's say in a project you have 3 design revisions as part of your standard process. When they ask for that 4th design revision, which frequently happens, and honestly, it's not always the time. It's a client isn't always taking it or trying to take advantage of you. They oftentimes just don't understand the creative process. So they're just like, oh, I didn't even realize we had done 3. Like, I don't even understand what a revision is. So it's oftentimes what it is we need to set these rules up front and be very clear as we go through, just so everyone's on the same page and everybody knows, like going into a round 1, what's to be expected before, what's to be expected during, and what's to be expected after. So I think having a really set contract and a really set scope of work that you talk through with your client or whoever you're doing this free or underpaid work for, to be sure that everybody gets it, like literally talk it through and be sure there's no questions. And then if things start to go out of scope a bit, if they ask for that round 4 when you only said 3, that's where you're able to say, you know, hey, this was what we agreed to. I'm more than happy to do a 4th round if you would like to invest X amount of money, or you know, figure out some other type of negotiation. But, you know, at this point, this is what we're able to offer. And more often than not, they will say, we'll happily pay you blah, blah, blah. Or they'll be like, oh yeah, actually, whatever. We don't actually need to see that. We just thought it would be cool. And more often than not, it's like done. There's no more questions asked. So I think that clarity up front is like the most important thing that you can do. And in addition to that, the clarity on how that work, whatever it is that you're creating, is allowed to be used. Obviously that's part of your contract, or at least it should be. So ensuring that you don't do this, I don't know, free work for a small shoe company in town, and you're like, yeah, that's your logo, and then they become Nike, and all of a sudden they're using that work across all of their apparel, and you're like,
dang,
wish I thought of that. So yeah, having those conversations up front is really, really important.
I loved what you said about how sometimes we kind of go on the defensive and we think somebody's trying to take advantage of us when they offer us terms that aren't great. But a lot of times they just don't know any better. And so a huge part of it is us educating our clients before we go into this place of, oh, they're a terrible person, they're trying to catch me and extract this work from me for, that mindset. I think there's a lot of perpetuating of that mindset too on socials and things like that. And I'm always of the mindset, like, give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they've never done this before, which is very possible. Think about, like, it's your mom or your dad or your grandpa, and you have to explain this stuff to, like, why would they know?
What's a graphic design?
Yeah, right. So sometimes you have to be a little patient and take on that role of being the educator and explaining the value and explaining how the process typically works, because they just might not know the industry.
Yeah. I think it's like you walk into a doctor's office, they're like, how much do you think your MRI is going to cost? You're like,
right.
I don't know. Or like, how much
That's
does
a great example.
Cost? Yeah. It's like, it's out of our industry. We have no idea. So that's the same when people come to us.
Yeah. I think it's always a good idea to approach anything with some empathy first, rather than going to that place of anger and defensive-ness.
Agreed.
Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave people with about free work, low paying work, anything to say?
Yeah, I have like 1.5 little thoughts, and it was something that you it was something that you touched on that I thought was really important. And in the creative industry, we have the opportunity to pay for marketing with money, or we can pay for marketing with our services. And so when you're doing free work, sometimes that is whatever you produce is marketing for your business. So you can choose to invest the time in creating that thing, and that's your marketing investment, or you can just pay for it. So I think
you can almost like set aside a budget, a marketing budget, and that's like, you can pay yourself for the like hours that you spend doing that work. Exactly.
And I think that's something that kind of gets looked over, and it's really important. And then the other thing is, early on, I don't know who's going to be watching this, but early on, at least in my creative career, I heard what kind of industry standard rates were, and I was like, I want to be making that. And I sure as shit was not. And what I basically found was I wasn't deserving of it at that point. Despite what Glassdoor or whatever those websites are said, I had no idea what I was doing. And so oftentimes doing this free work, underpaid work, self-imposed or initiated work, all this stuff forces you to learn and figure out and develop processes and techniques. And it forces you to learn how to present and communicate to your client, how to hear an idea and then strategize and create a visual solution that solves the problem of whatever this idea was. So I think a lot of this it's like the practice makes perfect idea. So just another thing I wanted to offer is, like, really consider when you're doing some of this stuff for free, it actually can be really beneficial for you as a creative to kind of just hone in on those processes. So when you do X, Y, and Z for $5,000, $10,000, $100,000, that you're doing it professionally and the process feels dialed, and your client never has an opportunity to doubt whether or not you're capable, because you've done it in such a professional, like, refined manner. Such a good topic, such wisdom from you, Adam. And I would love if anybody who's watching this would kind of chime in on your thoughts, share any questions you might have, drop them in the comments. We'd love to
hear what you're thinking about all this, because we know there's lots of different kind of viewpoints and things to consider. And Adam, we talked about at the beginning that you have a webinar coming up. Do you want to just recap that really quick?
Yep. Yeah. So the webinar is November 21st from, I believe it's 3 to 4:30 p.m. It's a Sunday, and it is titled Practice to Professional. So it is the 6 kind of key mindsets that I feel that we should adopt as creative individuals to take our practice or our passion in the arts and to turn it into a full-blown successful creative career. I've done this myself, taking hand lettering for fun and turning it into a 6-figure plus creative business. And my hope is that this talk is an opportunity for me to go through these 6 points, doing free work, which is one of them, and really highlight and talk very transparently about what I feel like are the best things that you can kind of consider early on in your career, and even halfway through your career, really whenever.
Amazing. So we're going to link the info below on how you can sign up for that. And if you miss the live date, it's going to be still available for you to watch the replay. So you're going to want to get in on that, and you're going to want to follow Adam because he's awesome. So make sure we'll put all your stuff down in the what do you call it? The downstairs, the YouTube downstairs.
We'll put it in the basement.
We'll put it in the YouTube downstairs so you can follow Adam everywhere. All right. Well, thank you so much for chatting, and we will see you later.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie.